To this day, now in his 7th year in office, the president has never proposed a budget that balances. Our budget will balance, but it's also about growing our economy, growing jobs, and building economic strength for our future.
As we welcome you into America's Forum for this Wednesday, we should note that the House Republican budget proposal that rolled out earlier this week has been getting a whole lot of attention, with Investors Business Daily calling it responsible, while calling the president's plan, quote, reckless. Speaker John Boehner, heard just a moment ago, is receiving some attention too, after appearing to have changed course, taking on a new strategy, deciding to negotiate and cut a deal with Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats first in his search for votes, while not even attempting to explain the decision to some strong conservatives within the majority of his own party. So, how will that decision affect some very important upcoming legislation, and how is it being perceived by strong conservatives within the House Republican Conference? For more on this developing story, we're pleased to be joined by North Carolina Congressman Walter B. Jones. Walter's a member of the House Committee on Armed Services. Walter B., it is great to have you back here on America's Forum.
JD, it's always my pleasure, and you do such a great job to inform the people that listen and watch you that it's a pleasure to be on your show and try to share my thoughts on the process.
Walter, you and I served together in the House. We remember the Hastert rule, where Denny Hastert, as Speaker, would not bring any legislation to the floor unless it was backed by a majority of the majority party of Republicans. John Boehner apparently has changed that, first with the amnesty vote, and now, according to Politico, he's looking for more Democrat votes. Has the Speaker turned his back on conservatives in the House Republican Conference?
JD, the answer is yes, and I would tell you that that's why many of us, I was one of 25 to vote this year not to elect him Speaker, to try to get to a second round and to get a Speaker who was true to the conservative principles and would try to lead the House based on conservative principles. And Mr. Boehner, in my opinion, does not try to lead with conservative principles at all.
Well, mindful of that, a lot of publications in D.C. say there's not going to be a change in the speakership. Are conservatives still working to oust Mr. Boehner?
Well, let me say it this way. You probably saw the article and maybe even talked about it, where this Outside America Network, which is one of these 501c3 groups, and they had spent $400,000 running ads against TV ads against Hulskamp, Bridenstine, and also Jordan, and then also radio ads against some of my colleagues, one being Mark Meadows from North Carolina. This is the Speaker's friend's former Barry Jackson, who you know well, was his chief of staff when early on in Boehner's service in the Congress, and he now heads that outside group. And this in itself has a skunk to it, my friend, a skunk to it.
Well, mindful of that, you had a pretty tough primary prior to the elections last year, and the Washington crowd made no secret of its concern about you staying in office. Do you believe that was led by Speaker Boehner?
I think friends of Speaker Boehner, including some of his former staffers, yes. The answer is yes, that if you can't be a puppet for the leadership, then they don't want you up here. I'm not a puppet for anybody but my Lord and Savior and the people of the 3rd District.
So do you expect continuing assaults from the Washington establishment in Republican primaries for you, should you choose to run again?
Absolutely, my friend. If I remain healthy, I intend to run again, and I want to be here with a new Speaker and do some things that I believe are right for our country. And but that's the price you pay, JD. You've been here. You know you can either fall in line and do what they tell you to do, or you can keep your conscience first and your independence second.
Well, with that in mind, we've got a minute left in this particular segment. Walter, let me ask you about the proposed House budget. Do you agree with it? Will you be voting for it?
No, because I don't like the smoke and mirrors game. You understand that term. You can explain it to your listeners. They probably understand it too. This, again, is another example of trying to bypass the budget resolution. I did not vote for sequestration. But I will tell you, when I see all the waste, fraud, and abuse in Afghanistan, it's billions of dollars. And then we're going to cut programs for children and senior citizens here so we can take care of the Taliban and the Al-Qaeda, who are our enemy, by the way. They're getting a lot of the money we send to Afghanistan. It does not make any sense. No, I'm not going to vote for this budget.
Afghanistan, topic A, when we continue our conversation with Congressman Walter B. Jones of North Carolina, an outspoken conservative, and we'll speak more with him as America's Forum continues.
After over $685 billion in taxpayers' dollars, blood and limbs lost in Afghanistan, it is time to stop the waste, fraud, and abuse of American taxpayer money. Afghanistan is an absolutely waste of taxpayers' money. It is a true graveyard of empires.
A graveyard of empires. Congressman Walter Jones from the well of the United States House of Representatives saying to those assembled there much what he was saying to us prior to the break, that we should reallocate funding set aside for Afghanistan for domestic programs, including those of our veterans. Mindful of that, let's continue our conversation now with the North Carolina conservative. Walter B., we do appreciate you staying with us.
Well, J.D., thank you, and I appreciate that. It's nice to hear how Southern I talk on the floor, so thank you for playing that clip.
Well, it is a courtly accent that perhaps belies, in that gentlemanly tone, a very determined member of Congress. And before we get to what's going on with our spending in Afghanistan, I need to get your reaction to the report that a 47-year-old Air Force veteran and airplane mechanic was arrested on terrorism charges yesterday after the feds say he was stopped in Turkey en route to join ISIS. Your reaction to that?
J.D., it's very, very disappointing and also alarming. I just cannot figure out why all these young people, in this case an Air Force non-commissioned officer, I believe you said it was, that would leave the American military to join ISIS. I cannot figure out. The world is in total chaos, and sometimes it's overwhelming to me, to be honest with you. And thank you for sharing that with your viewers and listeners and me as well. I had not seen that.
Well, Congressman, you obviously have seen a lot of things that concern you regarding our involvement in Afghanistan. You went through this shortly before our break. We heard what you had to say on the House floor. Your overriding concern with American involvement in Afghanistan, Walter?
Well, J.D., let me very quickly share, just for our conversation, there was an article called Down the Opium Rat Hole. This was about a year ago, and I'll read it very quickly. If you spent 13 years pounding money down a rat hole with little to show for it, you might wake up one morning and say, hey, I'm going to stop pounding money down the rat hole. We right now have a stronger opium business in Afghanistan than we did before we went in there. I mean, we don't even talk about that anymore. And let me share this with you. I was on the floor a year ago talking about Karzai is no longer the president of Afghanistan, but let me tell you the headlines in the New York Times. Karzai says he was assured CIA would continue delivering bags of cash. And I quote him, the CIA money, Mr. Karzai told reporter, was an easy source of petty cash, and some of it was used to pay off members of the political elite, a group of dominated by warlords. J.D., he was getting millions of dollars in cash every month from the CIA. Where's that money coming from? It's coming from you and me and all those people listening to your show and seeing your show who pay taxes. That rat hole has gotten bigger and bigger and bigger. Let's fix the rat holes and the roads and the bridges here in America first and not in Afghanistan.
Walter, in the 2 minutes that remain, let me get your reaction to the re-election of Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu in Israel. Do you think his re-election will result in an attitude adjustment from our own president in terms of the way those two have dealt with each other?
I don't know. I found out last night when I was listening to the news that at one time Mr. Netanyahu had said he believed in the two-state solution. Now he's saying he does not believe in it. I believe all it does is to continue to create the the fuel the fires in the Middle East. And I like Mr. Netanyahu. I respect him, but I don't know. I just can't figure out where the Middle East is going, to be honest with you.
Back here in this country, in terms of the way we regard foreign entities, reports that Iran and Hezbollah are both being removed from the terror list in its most recent report. In the minute that remains, do you agree with that?
No, I think Hezbollah especially needs to be on the terror watch list. I really do. I'm not sure I would go that far with Iran, but I will say that about Hezbollah. So I don't know, J.D. We're in a turmoil right now. We really are.
30 seconds remaining. Walter, in your opinion, are enough funds being directed toward the Veterans Administration and VA health care?
No, that's one of my biggest concerns about this budget and about all this spending in Afghanistan and overseas. We're taking money away that I think one day we're going to need to keep our promise to the veterans. I really do.
And certainly you have a lot of them who live in the 3rd Congressional District of North Carolina.
Absolutely.
Congressman Walter Jones, always appreciate your time and your insights. Thanks so much for making some time for us this morning on America's Forum.
Thank you, J.D. God bless you.
Walter B. Jones. He is firm in his belief and in his principles that he just shared with us. And there's more straight ahead here on America's Forum.